Hello. And welcome to the Robert E. Lee channel. I know my voice sounds horrible. This was the only one I could use, but today I will be doing a commentary on a video called, White People Cannot Experience Racism. Pretty racist video, don't you think?
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Leanna. Today we are going to be tackling the subject about why racism towards white people just does not exist.
That's racist. In fact, you'll call me racist for saying black racism doesn't exist.
Nor does reverse racism. This is something I've also heard it called. It's not a thing.
You're right. Reverse racism doesn't exist. It's just racism.
And please know that whenever I'm talking about racism, issues about race, I'm always trying to come to it from a position of a white person who's still learning every single day and talking to other white people who are hopefully in a position to hear and listen. I'm not an educator in any way, shape, or form, but I know that I am in a position to hopefully come onto a platform and have people listen. And that's always where I'm coming from. If I ever misstep, I'm very teachable. I'm open to that fact. Please let me know. And this is not a video addressing people of color at all, because I just can't do that.
Oh. This is one of these channels. If you don't know what I'm talking about, this is a channel who will make hateful videos towards white people but will never do it for black people. Reminds you of someone, doesn't it?
So as someone who has and who tries to have conversations about racism with other white people, I find that the biggest obstacle I come across is white people thinking that we can experience racism ourselves. It's almost like coming up against a giant roadblock. Stop here, go no further. It really is. Because once we feel like we are the oppressed, conversation just gets shut down.
White people are oppressed in South Africa and many other countries. And the only way you can feel racism is if you're oppressed. Racism is not oppression. It may lead to that, but it's not that.
As soon as we feel that we are also being oppressed, it's almost like that's when the centering happens. That's when the over here, me too, I'm also a victim happens. For example, the Black Lives Matter movement, it's something that addresses the issue of systemic anti-Black racism that is pervasive in our society. The All Lives Matter movement?
Fuck me. Okay, let's see here. BLM has murdered an 8-year-old, murdered an white mom for saying all lives matter, burnt multiple buildings down, and the only way to be safe from these people is if you join them.
Didn't exist until Black Lives Matter existed. That is a direct response to Black Lives Matter to say all lives matter. All lives matter is basically saying, but what about me?
What the hell is wrong with saying your life matters? And Martin Luther King technically said all lives matter. So he is a racist.
Yeah, sure, your life matters. What about mine? What about ours, okay? Our lives as white people already matter. In fact, they matter too fucking much.
I was trying to hold in the curse words because I'm a good boy, but whatever now. And you said white lives matter too much. Basically saying black lives should matter more and not equally.
Black Lives Matter has never been about black lives being the only lives that matter.
Sure seems like it. You just said white lives matter too much.
Black Lives Matter already means all lives matter.
Then why can't we say it?
It means that all lives need to matter, and right now they don't.
Again, technically saying only black lives matter.
And so we are focused on the fact that all lives don't matter and they need to matter, and that black lives right now do not matter equally.
They already are equal, you ignorant human.
To the rest. And if you don't get that, when you scream all lives matter, you're taking focus away from that and you are saying, what about me?
But what if you are more oppressed than black people and they don't care?
Because of this, I thought I would take the time to address the all too popular belief that racism is real towards white people. And it is a horribly popular belief. In fact, I wrote recently in one of my Patreon posts that from a 2018 poll, a poll of 15 to 24-year-olds in the US found that 43% of white American men and 29% of white American women agreed that racism against white people was a huge problem, as serious as discrimination against all other races.
First off, why did so many people say it isn't? Secondly, it is a huge problem.
So that should tell you right there that this is a huge problem. And I wrote also, I'm writing a series of posts about racism in Canada. This is also a problem here. And it's one that we are very good at denying, very good at turning our backs to, because people with white skin privilege are very good at turning our heads away from things that don't affect us personally. Just like with any marginalized group, say if you're an abled individual, ableism doesn't affect you, so you're very good at turning away from disability issues. Any marginalization that does not affect you can become very easy to look away from, right? That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It doesn't mean it's not an issue. And this is just my own personal anecdote and my own personal observation. What I've personally noticed is that white people who believe that discrimination towards whites based on race, they tend to believe this based on a very basic dictionary definition.
Don't you love it when people change definitions to make their point? Also, that dictionary is more believable than this video.
That's what they throw out there. Is like, well, this is what I read in a dictionary. Discrimination on a person based on skin color, based on race. That's a huge problem. To rely on a dictionary definition in this day and age for something horribly complex, don't you think that that in itself is
What's the new racism definition?
a problem? What if you were trying to explain to someone what cancer was like? This is something that, say, you or someone you know had personally experienced, and you were trying to tell them how horrible it was. And then the person you're telling comes back to you and says, well, I read this in the dictionary. This is what the dictionary told me it was like. So you're wrong.
Yet it won't say it's horrible. It gives you information about its genius. And what does cancer and racism have in common?
So you're basically just denying the lived experiences of the person who's actually been through it. That's what denying racism is. And you might think that's an unfair comparison to compare racism to cancer. It's not, though. Racism is a cancer. It's killing people every single day. Referring to the dictionary for someone's lived experiences is nothing less than abusive gaslighting.
I think it was disgraceful that the intelligence agencies allowed any information that turned out to be so false and fake out. I think it's a disgrace. And I say that, and that's something that Nazi Germany would have done and did do.
Understand why racism against white people isn't a thing. It's important to understand what racism actually is and how it functions.
Tell me the new damn definition.
Racism can be individual. This is something that occurs on an individual level, person to person. This is the biases that you have and we have, and how we take that out in our interactions with another person. So microaggressions, tone policing, gaslighting, and of course the use of racial slurs. But racism, more importantly, is also systemic and it's institutional. This means that racism has permeated every corner of society. It is in every institution of society, such as education, healthcare, political platforms and voting, employment, and so on. It's everywhere. But let's go back to individual racism for a moment, because this is where a lot of people tend to get hung up and stuck on the fact that, okay, well, if racism is individual, then that means that anyone can be racist to anyone else, which isn't really true, because then you're missing another key component, which is that racism also is privilege and power.
Finally. Okay, so racism is privilege plus power? The Ku Klux Klan doesn't have any privilege. Well, you'll say they have white privilege, but they have zero power. So they only have one out of the two things they need to be racist. The KKK isn't racist now, woohoo.
Having hurt feelings for being labeled a piece of food is not the same thing as being called a word that has historically been used to demonize, dehumanize, and oppress an entire group of people. And it's always been us, white people.
Why do you people always say, well, in the past we were very racist, so we can't experience racism? Guess what? Black people have also done bad things. Don't single out one race.
Who are in the position of oppressor. It's always been us, white people, who have been in the position to create systems and institutions to oppress Black, Indigenous, and people of color.
Why are you singling out one race? What about white people in Africa? They are oppressed. And guess who's in power? Black presidents.
When it boils down to it, the oppressor really cannot be oppressed.
Not all white people can oppress Black people. And you need a history lesson.
There have never been systems or institutions put into place in society that oppress white people solely on the purpose of race.
2 words, Nazi Germany. Hitler killed many Jews and most of them were white. This goes to show that there have been systems that are meant to oppress white people.
Yes, there are systems in place that can oppress white people on other things, such as disability, ableism. There are systems put in place to oppress people based on gender and sexuality, but these are not based in racial identity. These are things that cross over regardless of race. So a person who is white and disabled or trans or queer is not going to have the same experiences as someone who is Black and disabled or trans or queer, etc. These things cross racial lines. They are not exclusive to the identity of being white. So yes, white people can be oppressed for certain parts of their identity. Whiteness is not it. And
history is important, kids.
Racism is not something that happened overnight. Not at all. It's something that's been happening for centuries. White people are the ones who created the construct of race. Race is a social construct, and along with it, we also created racism. This concept aligns greatly with European imperialism and colonialism, for racism was really kind of concocted as a way to justify the brutalities of slavery.
Black people also had slavery brutalities. Years of tribal warfare started the slave trade.
Colonization and eugenics, and all three of these brutalities are still taking place in society today, just in different ways. Slavery has taken form through the mass incarceration system, which disproportionately affects Black, Indigenous, and people of color. One of the ways colonization takes form throughout our world is through a dominant group of people or a country stealing goods and resources from a less dominant group or country.
That's called war now.
The perpetrators of whom are predominantly North America and Europe. Eugenics, a system that never really went away, is seen a huge